So thanks everybody for coming back. I see a lot of names that we've seen the whole time. That's pretty exciting. Um, and I know there might be one or two new folks on here as well. So just a refresher of where we've been before we got here. We've had 5 weeks of this. We're on our fourth. If you've missed one of the sessions, like I missed last week's, they're all available in the Knowledge Center. This one will be available in a few days, I'm sure. I watched last week's yesterday to make sure I could see all the things that y'all talked about without me and make sure I get that knowledge input. And so I just wanted to go over what we learned in these past sessions real quick. So session one was all about defining agritourism, understanding what it is, what it isn't, thinking about those different activities that are involved in agritourism. We went over the benefits for yourself, your farm family, your local community. And then we talked a lot about product development and thinking about what agritourism looks like on your farm. We also had a description of interpretation and how to make sure that interpretation is a part of agritourism and that product development. And then for session two, we did a lot of business talk. I gave a lot of spreadsheets for y'all to work out after, and hopefully y'all all filled out all those worksheets and took them to your small business centers. But we started off with talking about goals for our overall farm business, goals for our agritourism operations and how those relate to each other. And then thinking about how that builds into the business concept. We talked about kind of our workload and what we need to think about when adding these operations and how to make sound financial decisions when we're adding these agritourism operations, being realistic about the return on investment within 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, with whatever that activity is we're adding. For session three, Dr. Andrew Brannon came on and gave us a lot of knowledge about farm law for producers and landowners, liability versus regulations, how those two things are related and how they differ. He talked a lot about insurance and what you need to know about insurance. And then we got into the weeds with agritourism liability. And then for last week's session, from what I saw, it looked like you had some great speakers. Erica came on and talked about marketing agritourism and some of the things to think about. She also talked about some creative partnerships for you to think about when you're offering agritourism and how to get involved in the community. Lee Rankin came on and talked about the Agritourism Networking Association and the value that they can provide, the conference that they have, the tours, and the community you can build with those other farmers. And then Carol talked also about some community involvement options there. She made sure to highlight some organizations to look into. She talked a lot about packaging, which is part of that networking piece, building those relationships with other businesses to provide a special experience for your customers. And then you had Danny give that incredible talk about storytelling. So there was a lot of information that was provided throughout this session. And so with that, we'll get started for this week's presentation. So we're going to start off talking about being visitor ready. We've gotten all the steps beforehand. What do we need to do for when we have these customers? I also heard there were some questions about funding opportunities. So I have just a couple of slides there to look at potential grants or loan opportunities. And then we're going to talk about some examples of farms that are applying kind of all these things we've learned these past few weeks. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to tell us if you have a farm that has some idea or creative way you're working around or thinking through these kind of the frame that I put these in. We want to hear from you. We're building our network right now on this call. So I've started all the presentations with this. So I wanted to make sure that we are doing that here. What is agritourism? Making sure we're all on the same page. It's a farming related experience enjoyed on a working farm or other agricultural setting for entertainment or educational purposes. So, are we visitor ready? So we've established through our last sessions, through all the worksheets we've worked through, the agritourism activities that we are going to apply on our farm. We've figured out the simplest options for getting started and maybe thought about how we're going to scale up in future seasons. We've thought about what our best financial and business plans with those agritourism operations, how they make sense staffing and capacity wise. We've thought about our farm goals and how this agritourism activity we're adding onto our farm builds into those overall farm goals. We've thought about liability and insurance best practices with the new knowledge we got from Andrew. We've thought about those networks, packages, and marketing plans, ways to get the word out about our activities that we're going to start or add onto our operation. And we've thought about authentic stories to enhance visitor experience. And if you're still working on that, it sounds like there's a great workshop coming up from Uplift to develop that story a little bit more. So visitors are when you have visitors onto your farm, you're essentially in the customer service realm. So I had to throw in a little bit of customer service information here because we haven't necessarily touched on what it requires to host people onto your farm. So this is from actually a customer service training we have with Extension for businesses. I'm not going to get too into customer service, but just a couple of slides about it. So there are 5 dimensions of service quality, just things for you to think about. Reliability, assurance, tangibility, empathy, and responsiveness. So what do we mean when we say this? So reliability is dependable. It's this kind of knowing that people are getting what they expect when they come to your farm. If on your website it says you're open from 9 to 4 on Saturdays in May and June, people need to show up from 9 to 4 in May and June and get the experience they expect. That's really all reliability is. Assurance is that trustworthy piece, making sure that you have somebody there that's knowledgeable to answer questions. So if you're working with your kids on the farm and you're hosting berry picking, making sure those kids can answer questions that are pretty typical, but would be something that would make people feel like they're at a more authentic experience. Tangibility is thinking about those elements that are around the farm. So the quality of the scenery that's there, making sure that if people are walking around the rows that they're clean and tidy, people feel like they want to eat the berries they're picking in your berry farm. Making sure the infrastructure is up to date, looks sturdy, nice, the staff is presented well, and that there's communication materials that make it easy for people to find what they're going to do. When you're thinking about customers, the time that you should be thinking about their interaction is really from the time they pull into a parking lot. Do they know where to go from the parking lot to where that experience starts? Making sure that there's signage to make it easy for people to find where they need to be. And also using communication materials that are fun and creative that can maybe answer a lot of the easy questions that you and your staff are having to provide. Sometimes we get tired of answering the same questions over and over. So finding fun ways to address that. You'll still have to answer those questions, but maybe not as much. Empathy is part of a visitor experience, making sure people feel valued when they come onto your property, that they feel heard, that their concerns are met. And then responsiveness, making sure that customers feel like they have somebody there that's willing to assist, making sure that you have folks that are able to see when customers need assistance and can answer promptly, and obviously resolving problems. I'm going to talk a little bit about problem resolving here just because that happens sometimes with customers, so it's important to have a good base there. So I have some friends at the Ohio State University Extension that developed this kind of way to think about preparing for customers on agritourism operations. And so they have kind of this cycle that they think about it with. So preparing, so thinking about with you and whoever else is working on your agritourism operations, writing a plan for how to deal with issues that might arise. Write out what experiences are included in your activities, what aren't. Make it very clear where people are allowed to go and not allowed to go so that you and those you're working with on the operation understand that. And then for your employees, make sure they see the plan, selecting employees maybe to be in different roles on the farm based off of what they're interested in, making sure they're trained for whatever that is, and then rewarding them when they do a good job. We always like to be rewarded for good work. And then responding and mitigating. So understanding that this customer relationship is a long-term thing. If somebody has a bad experience, perhaps they're never going to come back. They might tell other folks about it. That could live in perpetuity. But also, we want to make sure that future customers don't have that same experience if it's something we can do to adjust. So making sure we can fix things and responding on social media in a polite way when appropriate. It's not always appropriate, but sometimes it is. Customer reviews, responding to those and letting people know that you hear they're upset, you hear that they really enjoyed themselves, just makes people feel like their opinions are valued. As a person that I worked for a destination marketing organization, and I oftentimes would look through our partners' websites to see who was responding to customer reviews in a timely manner that was respectful of those people's views. It makes me know that I can trust that entity to take care of the customers and value what their experience is there. So it's a good way to build trust, not only within the customers, but with your partners in the area. Recovery, so have a plan for potential customer service fails. This is where that plan from the beginning comes in. If you're just starting agritourism, this is going to happen. If you have agritourism and you've had it for years, this is going to happen. People are a fickle bunch, so we're going to do things that throw you off. So making sure you just have a plan in place that's that proactive mindset, designating who is in charge for whatever sort of issue could arise and how they can communicate with that person in charge. Just making it very easy for this person is complaining to your daughter who's working with them, and you really want your daughter to have the walkie-talkie to be able to call you to say, hey, can you come over? We're having an issue here, just so that we can make sure to nip it in the bud really quickly. And then improving practices, having a way for you and your staff to document things that come up like this, making sure that it's something you can write down, you can think about how to prepare for the next time, and anticipating future issues that might be similar. So just limiting those sort of experiences or figuring out ways to adjust. There's going to be a lot of learning when you start this. And so we all, in all of our positions, have opportunities for failure. It's a part of learning. And so making sure that we document it, or there's some way for us to address it and make sure we're thinking about how to be successful or more successful in the future in those same, we don't want to fail in the same way twice, right? We want to learn from our mistakes and improve those experiences. So yes, the visitor ready. So these are just some quick things to do if you have a complaint. 6 rules to live by if visitors complain. Listen, make sure you're listening carefully to what they say fully, repeating it back to make sure that they can acknowledge that you understand completely what they're upset with, apologizing that they're upset. You don't necessarily have to apologize about the specific incident. But making sure that you know that you're acknowledging that their feelings are valid, whatever those feelings might be, explaining what action will be put into place. And if it's something that's big and you can't do that in the moment, telling them that you're happy to follow up and let them know what sort of plan you're putting into place to make that experience different if they want to come back in the future. And then thanking them for bringing it up. It's how we learn, right? When people tell us about things that we do incorrectly. And so this last slide is just, I needed something to wrap up this customer complaint section. So just, it's basically reminding people to be kind. We don't really know what people's backgrounds are or kind of what shapes the way that they see or view the world that we're working in and the experiences that we're trying to provide. So showing compassion and appreciation is always kind of the first way to lead, especially with customers. And patience is a big piece of having people come onto your property. So making sure that you have people that are patient and you have patience. And then this is from this image is from that customer service training. There was a Chick-fil-A ad a few years ago that had something about people not knowing, what's going on in people's life. And so it's just important for us to remember that as we have people on, and perhaps the way they're responding isn't something that we fully understand. So with that, are there questions about visitor ready? I see a lot of things in the chat. So we don't see any questions about this. We'll dive into our next, which is potential sources of funding. And so I just have 2 quick slides here. There's a lot more here, but on my second slide, I'll give a shout out to where else to look for these. So Federal and state sources, the North Carolina Tobacco Trust has many grants that are serviced through three main entities: Ag Ventures, which is through NC State, which is a lot of the Piedmont region, Western North Carolina Ag Options, which is the western part of the state, and then the University of Mount Olive is Ag Prime. They're all the same grant program. They're just through different entities for different parts of the state. Ag Prime is the eastern part of the state. And so they offer grant cycles. It's closed for 2024, I believe, and they have, I'm not totally sure of the range of funding, but I believe you can apply twice. They give preference to property farms that were tobacco and have transitioned, but you don't necessarily have to have that to apply. And they give preference to folks that haven't applied before. For these grant options, you're going to have to work with your extension office. I think that's a requirement of them. That's going to be a requirement of a lot of grants that you want to apply for, but they're a great opportunity. So I would definitely go through and look at those options. If you just search NC State Ag Ventures, it'll give you links to all the other ones so you can see about what the specifics are for that. But they work for infrastructure. They can be agritourism specific or for whatever product you're developing. I believe Carol talked about RAFI last week. They have some financial assistance there. And then the North Carolina Department of Agriculture sometimes has options for farmers, especially with marketing assistance, depending on kind of what they have coming through. So that's where being on the listserv, their agritourism newsletter, is really valuable because those sorts of things will come across. And being in tune with the North Carolina Agritourism Networking Association will help you kind of see those opportunities. One of the farms that I have as an example later talked about how they worked with the North Carolina Department of Ag and through some grant program, and they were able to overhaul their website and their social media and their logo development through a partnership there. So they do come up. Some of the bigger ones, the Farmers Market Promotion Program is really a market program. These USDA grants can be quite cumbersome for farms to apply for. They're trying to make it easier, but just want to be honest about that. Southern SARE, which is the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, has a producer grant, and that one is much easier for producers to apply for. And they do offer programs. You could make agritourism one of the options there, but if you're looking for any sort of resources around sustainable agriculture, they have a lot of research that's made pretty easy to understand there. There's a lot of extension producer sort of partnerships that apply for programs through that. So I would definitely take a look through their resources if you ever have questions or thinking about even technical questions about a specific crop that you're growing. They have a lot of resources. The NRCS has some infrastructure cost share programs. So if you're looking to put in fencing or need like a water or something, that's a group you could work with. And then the USDA also has a value-added producer grant. Again, it's not the easiest to work through. And then for private foundations, I know Carol talked about the conservation funds, resourceful communities last week. And then there's the Conservation Trust of North Carolina. A lot of these are going to have to work through qualified fiscal sponsors, and even the ones on the slide before, you'll likely have to work with some sort of municipality or the county extension office or university. But you have a resource through Uplift to help you when you're looking for these funding sources. So they have a specific person that works to help with different funding operations, funding. I'm sure they have webinars about funding if you're looking for things. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight that they have staff dedicated to helping identify funding sources. They're not there to help you write grants or whatnot, but they're there to help you find ones that are options. So, any questions about funding? All right, well, we're going to go into some examples that are kind of putting together everything we've talked about, and then I'll open it up for you all to give us some of your own examples if you'd like. So when we talked about business planning, I talked about these agritourism spotlights. This slide is actually hyperlinked if you want to link the agritourism spotlights into the chat for me. Or I can do it after this. So these are just a bunch of different examples where we kind of went through all these different things that I'm going to go through in the next slides about kind of how these farms developed agritourism. Um, and so, yes, the first one is Allied Organics. We talked about Allied Organics financial, kind of thinking about how they were charging for fees and whatnot. So here we're going to talk a little bit more about the other things with the farm. So Tom Savage, we're not related, really wanted to start this farm in Hurdles Mill as a opportunity to grow healthy food and kind of think about ways to produce healthy fruits and vegetables for those in the area and to sell them at the farmers market. So he started part-time farming in 2010, selling vegetables at the Person County Farmers Market. He actually started and then stopped. He took about 4 years off to learn more about how to develop sustainable soils and cultivate different vegetables. He says what he grows is original vegetables and then ethnic vegetables. So he had a specific clientele that was looking for something that he wanted to figure out how to source for him. And so he developed a business concept that was really grounded in an idea of intergenerational learning. He wanted to make sure his farm had opportunities for different types of people. And so they have activities for the young, like bounce houses and those really active things to let them get all their energy out on your farm. To those that are older with more educational things like quilting workshops, beekeeping workshops, different vegetable production workshops. And then they also have these farm to table dinners and events for local communities. He was learning and networking. He worked with a lot of folks. He says he started off working with the local farm, Breeze Farm, and they were able to kind of help him as he first got started. Then he worked closely with his Orange County Extension office. Once he started planting himself, they were able to come out and work with him. And then he talked about how instrumental the North Carolina Agritourism Networking Association was to getting him off the ground and how now he really sees it as an organization that he gives back to. So this is where aligning with the Agritourism Networking Association is really valuable because there's a lot of folks that got started with them and they see the value in putting efforts into you all if you're starting out and making sure that you are successful as well. For marketing and promotion, Tom built loyal clients really through the farmers market. He showing up weekly at the farmers market with products that people could rely on, made people really invested in wanting to go out when he had special events. He's having a farm to table dinner. I love his produce, so I'm going to go and support his farm. And then he accessing and mitigating risk is really done. Tom is lucky. His wife, Laura, is his insurance agent. And so when they got started with agritourism, it was still kind of an unknown world with the insurance, but she was able to dive in and really become an expert on the topic. And while things continue to evolve, they continue to learn and make sure that they're up to date with all their coverage. So that might not be the most helpful because we aren't all married to insurance agents, but that's the way that he works through it. Then we have Hickory Creek Farm. We talked about Hickory Creek Farm. This is our Christmas tree farm. It was a 4th generation tobacco farm that transitioned to this Christmas tree farm. And so Kevin, there's a lot of names, so I have to make sure I'm calling him the right one. Kevin had dreamed of this concept for 20 years. He took his nephew to a pumpkin patch and wanted to do agritourism ever since. And so one year he finally, what did he say? He went to an Agritourism Networking Association conference. He saw Annie Baggett, who was the past agritourism specialist there, talk about kind of what you need to do to add agritourism, and was so inspired that year he went and bought Christmas trees out in Western North Carolina and brought them back. And his dad said, "You're out of your mind." But he now says his dad is his biggest supporter and there's no way that they could be growing profitably without agritourism. So Kevin's main networking and partnerships that he mentions are working with the local farm near him where they share equipment so they can share the cost of maintenance and repair for the equipment that they have. So networking and partnerships don't also always look the same. It's whatever works best for your business. So thinking about kind of perhaps that as a opportunity there. For marketing and social media, marketing and promoting, I say social media because they all talk about social media being pretty valuable. And they really focused on how adding additional activities beyond just Christmas trees were really valuable to building their customer base. So they added You Pick Sunflowers, they have this Easter egg drop. ways for the customers to stay engaged all year. So when it came Christmas time, it wasn't like they had forgotten that they existed. And then for the risk piece, the Agritourism Networking Association was a huge help. And Kevin really pointed out two important things to him with risk. Signage, so making sure you have appropriate signage in the appropriate places, and establishing and maintaining a good relationship with liability insurance carriers. So Kevin isn't married to his, but he still has a good relationship with his insurance carrier. High Mountain Meadows, this was our creamery that we talked about a couple weeks ago. Donna, who began farming in 1990. Her farm has grown from cheese production to include farm stays and cheese making classes. And so sustainability was really kind of the core in her business concept. She values these solar panels that she has on her property, rotational grazing, composting are all key parts of her farm production. And so she makes sure whenever she hosts guests, either for classes or even just for farm stays, that they really get an understanding of what that looks like on the farm. For learning and networking, she invites regional farms to come when she hosts workshops to also provide their expertise or provide a class on whatever it is they specialize in. She worked with the Tri-County Community College Small Business Center when she was getting started. She's worked with Cooperative Extension, the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Program that I know Carol talked about last week was a valuable partner. She's in that region, so she's able to tap into that. She talked about the North Carolina Farms app being something that was really valuable to help her with expanding her network. And the American Dairy Goat Association, since she raises dairy goats, and Harvest Host. And Harvest Host is a organization that you can sign up for. You pay to be on it. And essentially it shows that you're willing to host recreational vehicles on your property. And they generally tell people to purchase some amount from you if you're hosting them. So a lot of breweries have them, some farms have them, some churches, and they just have kind of suggestions for what they can, how they can pay you since they pay into the membership with Harvest Host. If that makes sense. I can talk more about Harvest Host offline if you have questions. For marketing and promotion, social media again. She also uses local newspaper to get the word out about her. Word of mouth is one of the biggest ways that she likes to get her promotion out. And so she has an annual open house every year where she welcomes visitors. And she says that she gives them a tour and then they get goat snuggles. So what a great word of mouth. We all want to go get goat snuggles at High Mountain Meadows soon, right? I know Carol's in. And then she deals with risk by doing general, like usual walks around her property. She has trails on the property. And so she also walks her fence lines, makes sure there aren't any new hazards that have popped up. And she also generally has closely supervised visits since people are coming for those classes. And then she works with Farm Bureau and ASAP, who have provided a lot of valuable advice to her for risk. Just a few more. Millstone Orchard. This is a pick your own destination. They start off in the summer with blackberries and blueberries. Then later in the summer, they have peaches, grapes, and sunflowers. The fall, they kick off their apples, pumpkins, and gourds, and then they end the year with pecans. So they have quite a busy year starting here in the next couple of weeks. They also have like a farm market where they host different craft events, and they try to have like seasonal niche products that match whatever offering it is that people are picking their own at the time. Their business concept was really based on leaving a legacy. That's what they kept kind of referring back to. So the farm was bought by a father and his wife, and then they realized kind of how much work was going into it. They were retired. They wanted to start this orchard. So the daughter and her husband stepped in and said, okay, let's figure out how we can help you out here. And so it became this family entity and like making sure that they're leaving a legacy about these products in the region. They attributed a lot of their learning to Martha Glass, who was in the agritourism specialist position before Annie Baggett. So in a few years, we're going to hear about Erica and who she impacted with her work as the agritourism specialist. Those are good people to have on your side. And the Agritourism Networking Association was also a key part of their learning. And now they find that they're in this like mentor position. They were mentees there at first, and now they're mentors, and they like to have trainings about fruit, um, grafting, soil workshops, pruning, those sorts of things. And they host local farmers markets so that other small new farmers have an opportunity to sell their goods. They really want to be an incubator for farms. For marketing, they use typical channels like Facebook, Google, email, and they had a viral social post a couple years ago about their apple cider donuts, which are in the picture. So this is where finding those niche products. Remember in the first session, we talked about our unique assets. And so this was what they had, and it went viral. And so they had a lot of visitors come from that. And the Tourism Development Authority or Destination Marketing Organization, that's where they really come in handy with thinking about what sort of content is really going to grab people to want to either go viral or get media to come and do a story on you. And then their risk, they mitigate it in three main ways. Training, so they have training for them and their staff. Incident reporting, so this is kind of going back to what we talked about earlier. And then signage and barriers. So their thought process is being proactive is the most important when agritourism is what you're offering, making sure you're reducing those risks. We don't want any reactive agritourism operations. We want everybody to be proactive here. Shelby corn maze. I just have this one and one more. So this is a corn maze that was started in 2001, and they really started it to kind of help offset the property taxes. They bought the property in 2000, and corn mazes weren't necessarily all over the place by that point. So they read about it in a magazine and were interested in kind of thinking about how they could adopt it there. And so farm viability was really key to their business concept. And so, yeah, they had this new opportunity, a new product they could offer. And so Jean reached out to experts to learn kind of what the basics were. For learning and networking, they hired a private technical support group, the Maze. Brett Herbst, I guess, leads it. They read about him in this magazine. So again, this is where those networks look different for different products that you're offering. So kind of thinking outside of the box. So this guy came on to the property. They have support staff that come on and help them think about what's the best crop to grow, how best to grow it. And they really talked him through the process. It seems like they have some sort of thing in the contract where they can't have too many in the same region. So I don't know what that looks like if you're thinking about reaching out to the Maze. But yeah, so this is just an opportunity that they found, and it seems like they came in at the right time to be able to tap that expertise. And so for promotion, they work with the website company to help with their internet presence, essentially. And they said they have a farm savvy millennial for social media support, which is always good to have some farm savvy, whatever generation is best now at social media. I'm not sure it's millennials anymore. And then they're listed on several directories. A lot of these folks talked about the directories they were listed on that kind of match up with what they're offering. And then they always work with local media. They say they try to host local media out on their farm every year. So thinking about how you can get that earned media is always a valuable thing. And then the last one we have is Baker Buffalo Creek. So this is our winery. So Charles and Ann spent a long time learning about how to grow grapes. And then they spent a long time growing grapes. But they now grow 8 grape varietals on 10 acres. And agritourism has given them a better connection to their consumers. Also in the spotlight, they talk about how their daughter actually works for the wine industry out in California. So that's helpful for their kind of business concept. So their business concept was really building into the beauty of the well-manicured land and then the history of it. The land that they're on, the property they have has an old distillery on it from the 1800s. So there's just some interesting things there for them to come into. And at first they weren't really hosting people, but people would come out for like very specific events or whatnot and just let them know, it's so beautiful out here. We would come out here all the time if you had that option. So that's where their agritourism, their regular agritourism came from. For their learning and networking, extension was important for the farm support. North Carolina Department of Ag, this was the group that got the grant with North Carolina Department of Ag where they were able to help with their marketing, and they helped them do their logo and redo their website. They also work with the North Carolina Wine Growers Association. So being a part of those associations that are with your products are valuable, because they talked about how they have a quality assurance program with this group to make sure that the wines in North Carolina are meeting a certain threshold. So it's something that benefits them, but also benefits the wine growers as a whole for North Carolina. For their marketing, they have website and social media. They have new and creative events. So this is where their daughter, who works out in California, they're like, what sort of events should we have? What are they doing out here? What can we take back to try to get new audiences to the winery? They also work with website directories, the Visit and See Farms app, and local TDA and media. And then for their risk, they do regular inspections. They're similar in that they pay special attention to parking areas, bathrooms, buildings, making sure that kind of the areas where people tend to be are taken care of. They said they use the Cincinnati Insurance Group for their insurance, and then they require wedding parties to secure wedding liability insurance as a condition of renting their facility. So if you're thinking about weddings, it's a good thing to keep in mind. And so now we have 12 minutes or more left. So what are your examples? I just went through a bunch. Where are you? Tell us about your operation. Do you have a business concept in mind? Do you have like a place you're learning or networking? Is there a way that you're thinking about marketing and promoting? Have you thought about how to assess and mitigate risk? You don't have to answer all these questions if you tell us about your business, but we're starting our networking here, right? We're building our community. Wonderful. Well, it seems like people are ready to wrap up. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions pop up. I can't promise that I can answer them, but I certainly can try to get you connected to somebody that can, or try to find an answer for you. I really appreciate y'all's time being here for so many weeks, even a week that I couldn't make it. I hope that it was valuable for you, and please feel free to email any of us with any questions or feedback ideas or future program around agritourism interests that you have.